This is a new thing I'm trying called Salmon Theory Talks. I want to have conversations with modern marketers about how they think deeply about things. Today, I am joined by Ben Jenkins, who is the co-founder and CEO at Sympler. My name is Rob. For those of you who don't know me, I founded a company called Salmon Labs, and we are the ginormous enterprise of one behind Salmon Theory. Ben, welcome. Shall we just start with the first question? How do you describe your job to someone outside of your industry?
Often I don't describe my job to people outside my industry because I'm English and we try not to talk about work. But recently I've had some really interesting conversations when I've referred to what I do as being in the empathy business. I want to use technology and AI to change the way that we empathize with each other. I get quite passionate about that. It's because I don't want to be in the data business. Traditionally, you might refer to us as a research company, maybe a strategy company, maybe insights company. But so many of those words are either a bit flat, boring, and librarian, or just massively dehumanizing. And the worst of all of them for me is the data industry. I think that the being in the empathy business rather than the data business is the right place for us to look forward. And I think AI is actually better suited to that. My problem with the data business is that we spent the best part of the Industrial Revolution onwards converting humans into data points, putting them in boxes and forcing them into straight lines and models. And we've ripped out all of our natural, human, intuitive ways of understanding humans. So what we've taken out of the picture is humans being able to understand humans. Long before AI and modern technology came along, we were putting ourselves into boxes. We were still trying to align people up in roles, and it kind of dehumanized us. So I think that the business I'm in now is still the understanding business or the empathy business. But the tools I think we need to be using are going to be very different in the next few years than they have been in the last 150 years, which is when we started ruining our God-given instincts for understanding humans. The best understanders and readers of humans are other humans. We've developed over millennia instincts to understand what somebody means. The last couple of hundred years, we threw a lot of those out. The next period is going to be us putting them back in conjunction with technology. I think we're going to co-pilot this next journey with things like AI. AI is better placed than 20th century technology to actually forgive us for our chaos and our humanity and our weird, wonky lines and our lack of predictability, partly because it's quite unpredictable and wonky, and go so far as saying that AI is going to kind of remind us about creativity in this process as well.
Well, that's definitely the bull case, isn't it? Because I'm sure you follow or you come across the same types of opinions that I do, where people go, oh my God, everything's going to shit and AI can't write a headline. And you go, well, maybe it's not designed to. It's okay. I feel like most of the times whenever I see people screaming on LinkedIn, I just go, hey, it's okay. It's like a virtual hug. People just need to chill out a little bit.
AI can't write a headline is the wrong question. Often they're saying that because they're going, it's okay. They'll never be able to write a headline. I still have a job. I still have a role. My point is that actually, if you bring AI into the conversation, you'll be able to write a better headline, because it's nuts what you can get through a conversation with AI these days. And so we were talking about it last year as being like a precocious intern. This year, I think we're talking about it as being a really slightly nutty creative partner. And my position has moved. For the last 150 years, like, technology has conditioned us to believe that its job is to help us with efficiency. And if you're to use technology correctly, you have to become a bit like the machine in order to get the most from it. So, I don't know how many people have spent time working with coders, but you have to bring the way that your brain works right down to like stories and epics, as they call it in code, right down to the most basic things. And it forces you to stop thinking like a human in order to be able to tell the machine, like humans, how to program machines. All technologies up until now have done that. They've forced the human to be less human in order to get the most out of the technology, which will then in turn amplify our abilities. So if you want the amplification effect, you have to make yourself subservient to the machine's language. The new thing about AI is that you won't have to do that. While today it can't write a creative headline, it's a lot closer to being able to do it if you know how to spar with it than any other technology that we've ever seen. And that's for me what I get excited about.
It's weirdly tribal to put us and the machines in separate camps. It's a bit like going, oh, you strategists can't write a headline. We go, no, we can't. But by discussing with you, we can help you get to a better one. It's just the same thing. It just happens to have a third party, which is called Perplexity or Claude or whatever, GPT. I remember when ChatGPT started taking over and everyone started getting a bit obsessed about it, or at least everyone who was a bit nerdy. I remember someone hearing from someone else that, oh, you did some research with ChatGPT or you wrote some thought starts with ChatGPT. Is that cheating? And I was like, yeah, just like a computer is cheating. Why don't you do everything by hand? It's the same thing. It's just exponentially weirder.
Yeah, I think we need to get out of that. I mean, I've heard of university professors and high school teachers training cheating now. It's like telling their students that they need to be better at cheating. So we had this when I was growing up, when they talked about if you use a calculator, you don't need it if you've got a calculator from now on. What you need is how do you use that to get an unfair advantage? Cheating isn't the right, like, how do you co-pilot this now new cyborg future and to get even more? So our job now is to have better imaginations. And with this new technology, what can we do more of? The biggest thing that we forgot was how to use our instincts, because we spent so many years conditioning ourselves to interface with a substandard technology. I had an example from this morning. So we're editing together a film at the moment, and the computer keeps crashing because it's not strong enough to hold iMovie. And so there's loads of different things we want to say in this video, and we keep wanting to, and when we get a new version, we're like, actually, we could tweak this, we could tweak that. But because of the laboriousness of the technology and because it keeps crashing the machine, we feel guilty about having too many ideas. And I think that's a good metaphor for what a lot of technology has done. Technology has forced us through its stodginess and not even complexity, its oversimplicity and its refusal to bend to our every whim. It's conditioned us to have fewer whims. So I think we're with AI that goes, sure, and maybe it's lying sometimes, maybe it's hallucinating sometimes, but it's saying yes a lot more to being optimistic. And that, I think, is going to bring us out of our shells. We've been frightened, petrified into being boring and unambitious in what we ask of technology because technology hasn't been able to deliver it. This next technology isn't going to make you feel guilty. Our challenge is how to be whimsical and imaginative, optimistic and creative. Or have we spent so long with machines that don't want to work for you that we won't really ask enough of these ones that are very happy to do everything?
Absolutely. You seem to be very much into history. So what should I know about your history to understand who you are today?
Great segue. One of them is that I'm into history. My favorite subject at school was history, but I've always been fascinated with the future. I think that you can't really be a futurist or a visionary if you don't understand history. And the further back you go, the more you can see how things are likely to play out. You have a greater perspective on the world. So I actually do think your history segue is relevant to my history. I think the other relevant thing is that my kind of entry into the career world was during the dot-com boom and bust. And so I left university thinking what's going to happen next and kind of interested in marketing and brands and storytelling. But I also was looking over my shoulder and going, something's just about to happen that's quite interesting. Maybe I should be interested in that. And it was a little bit like a student approaches things. I had very fortunately done my thesis on the future of branding in the digital era. And it was all about, it's going to be two-way, it's going to bring a more human, weirdly, even then I was talking about we're going to get more humanistic. This technology of the internet will afford us to become more multi-directional and humanistic. The last century has been one-way broadcast, and we're going to start to bring in the word being used then was narrowcast. But I talked about human media, which was 2000, social media hadn't been invented. The 20th century was an anomaly when it came to communication. All of a sudden, one person had the power to talk to lots of people, and they couldn't talk back. And that was unusual for the way communication had happened forever. And so I think all I was looking at was that the likelihood that this is going to continue and it won't bring back some humanity is low. And so everything that I did in my first 10, 20 years of my career is now just a continuation now, which is, it was basically going, how do we bring humans and human skills like instinct and intuition and empathy and creativity and a comfort with some form of chaos. I think that at least career-wise, so university to school to first job, it was about how is technology going to rehumanize, and it in a way took longer than I thought, because we had that moment in social media where it's like democratic, everyone can do everything, and then we moved from like Facebook and Instagram to Snapchat, where it all became very personal, and then suddenly that private thing seemed to get stalled by mass media again. You know, the incumbency of Meta, for instance, was like, we don't want to go small, we want to go big and broadcasty. So I stalled for a few minutes, and I think we're going to come back. It's going to go back to being much more personal, intimate, intuitive, and creative.
We definitely see signals in that, right? I'm gonna sound old as shit now, but I still remember when Meta was trying to deposition TV, and then lo and behold, they became basically TV in terms of how they saw their role in your media mix, right? So I clearly remember them going sometime in 2015, going, you know what? We just uncovered that actually reach and frequency is a thing.
It was really depressing when that happened. From the 90s onwards, we were like, it's over. Broadcast era is over. The broadcasters will need to learn a new form of communication. It's going to be more, democratic and two-way, and it will pick up on people's whims, and the long tail is going to make, and that has sort of happened in terms of content production. But then all of a sudden, I think what got involved was the one thing propping the business propping up all of this free media, which allowed us to have the long tail in the first place, was advertising, and specifically media buying. And media buying didn't want to buy it in a new way, so it forced the likes of Facebook back into a reach and frequency model. And we went, after thinking that we'd left that in the 90s, because before advertising moved into the internet, the coders that were building the internet had great ideas for how advertising would get involved. And it was much more symbiotic and co-creation-y in the 90s. And then all of a sudden, Coke and, brands and, companies like Mindshare moved in. They're like, right, no, when they slowed it down. And then by 2015, even Facebook joined the club. Exactly. And was like, no, we can put it all back to the 80s.
Well, so the economies of scale just make it too alluring, right? Where they go, well, we can actually create a lot of shareholder value by basically stealing these other people's market share in terms of ad spend. And lo and behold, here we are. But it is interesting how tech and product-centric companies always go, ooh, advertising, it's dead, whatever. Amazon, Jeff Bezos specifically used to say advertising is the price you pay for a shit product. And now they're the number one advertiser in the world. So it's like, everyone hates it. It's like, everyone hates it till they lose their fucking cat, right? That whole David Droga thing. It's like, before you know, you go, oh, actually, this is a good way of making money, isn't it? Because you can make it at scale. You don't need to do a lot of work for it. So
yeah, in the end, they were lured back into its scale. And back to the technology thing, they were lured back into the scale and the belief that if you're going to get scale with this technology, it has to force you back into these simplistic models of reach and frequency in the way. But scale in this next chapter where AI is involved, where it can look at things it could be more responsive and nuance driven. I think now we're back to that point where you can have both. You can have your cake and eat it again. Scale then forced you into these very linear, dumb logic ways of looking at what it means. We have to put people into demographic boxes and fire, big, clunky, unsophisticated messages at them through very old school model. Yes. I think now the technology for doing scale and nuance has arrived again. Now, whether the purse strings holders, the mind shares and the metas will allow that back in, or whether they're even going to have a say in it, it's a different question.
Volume. I am kind of curious about what this next wave of monetization for AI companies is going to be, because so I'm a Perplexity power user. I haven't Googled a thing in like 3 months. I just use Perplexity because I find it like times better. I pay for the subscription because I like using the different models and blah, 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 and I can expense it basically. But there in the news, I saw a piece of news a few days ago that they are going to start introducing advertising. So now I go, okay, is this basically another version of crap PPC ad buys, or are they going to do something intelligent with the way they sell advertising on Perplexity? And I don't know if they know. I don't know. But yeah, there's kind of an interesting turning point where you go, hey, you have a chance of like have a more diversified business model, which means you don't always need to do advertising buys the same way because you probably get a substantial amount of money through subscriptions. Because if you think about Meta, like they were forced to do it because like 98% of their revenue is from advertising. They don't make money off of anything else. Whereas, for example, in markets like China, where a lot of companies have more diverse revenue models, they try different ad models because they can, because they have like microtransactions paying the bills elsewhere, etc. They're less worried. They can try more stuff. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen with the next few wave of tools as they start realizing that advertising is terrible, except actually it makes you a lot of money. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, there are ways of doing it. As I said, there were some excellent ideas in the 90s when they were designed by user-centric developers as opposed to money at all costs centric media folks who don't traditionally, unlike advertising folks who, at least the good ones, try to come at it from the perspective of the end consumer. Media is not coming at it from the perspective. It's just like, how do we maximize this media commission to get as many people eyeballs through this portal as possible? When it was developed by creators, makers, they came up with really mutually beneficial, part entertaining, part utilitarian ways of getting brands into the dynamic that was the early internet. And they look nothing like banners. They look nothing like pop-ups and interstitials and all the things that we were talking about then, because they weren't interruptive. And those never saw the light of day. The moment big business moved in, they were like, well, we buy these pages in magazines or posters on the sides of roads. Why can't we just do that? Even though the internet didn't look anything like the outside world, they forced the outside world in the form of banners and interstitials, like TV commercials. We do not access the internet like television either, but we forced in TV ad break style interstitials, we called them, and banners, which even in the outside world are no good. And so, me, it was a lack of it was a lack of empathy. But it didn't mean that there weren't creators coming up with really good ideas. So it doesn't mean that those people aren't here today. The people who create the technology that works should also be the people that create the involvement of advertising. Because there are ways. I'm still optimistic about that. There are ways of injecting brand involvement, because we don't even want to call it advertising. It's like there's a way that brands can be useful in these places. That if you connect and collaborate with the builders of the environment, and you're a little bit less arrogant about how much you know about that environment, I do think there's still a role for brands, and I do think that could be a commercial role that keeps everyone afloat.
I think one interesting thing about that, not that it's a space I know a huge amount about, but I know of it, but like you start seeing companies that represent, like, for example, Roblox creators as an example of someone who specializes in building an environment. And then I would imagine some companies are trying to now broker ways in which brands can work with that creator into doing something of value. It's not about buying a poster inside a Roblox space. That's just turning the old medium into a new thing and shoehorning it in. There's probably other intelligent ways of doing it. So it's kind of one of the reasons I'm bullish on the creator space, because there is still so much entertainment value to be derived out of those partnerships that goes beyond just people taking photos of them using products or whatever stuff that is.
I think you bring up a good segue for me to sort of talk about why we did Sympler the way we're doing it as well, which is designing it for the new environment as opposed to shoehorning an old technique into a new technology. So when we came about, the problem that we identified was that people weren't connecting as closely and empathetically with consumers in research as much as they had been back in the day where we spent a lot of time meeting them in person. The growth in technology in the late 20th century and early 21st had massively helped things like quant, It had invented a new tech, and because now everything has a data point and can be like added up essentially, and it's the simplistic way. And it invented another one called social listening. And quant was suddenly supercharged, and surveys suddenly got like this because they slotted quite nicely into what technology is already good at doing, which is straight lines and boxes and codifying and numbers. Whereas qual in that context looked really almost dumb. It looked quaint, stodgy, expensive, time consuming. And these are all words that, 20th century doesn't like. It doesn't look efficient. Doesn't mean that it still wasn't a really important way to like dig up really truthful, surprising, insightful gems about humanity. That was still true, but it didn't matter in the sort of like early 21st century business. It was like, doesn't matter. This just isn't for us anymore. Like businesses are not going to like. So what Qual tried to do is it rushed at the technology by taking their old formats like focus groups and just digitizing them. Let's do an online focus group. Focus groups in the first place weren't the best environment for humanity. They were kind of uncomfortable. Bright lights, mirrors, strangers judging you, dude with a clipboard or a woman with a clipboard asking you questions at worst. At best, it was a bit more like group therapy, and IDIs were a bit more like real therapy. But ethnography was a bit better, but really expensive, especially really contextualized in this era of big data and social listening. So all of a sudden it just looked really silly. As I say, focus group online is even worse than a focus group in person. It was already kind of dehumanized by having these conditions of lights and strangers. You throw in a digital barrier as well, and it made it even worse. So our ability to really share. So if you were to come out of the whole thing and you didn't know anything about how qualitative was done in the 20th century, and you were inventing it now in the 21st, with the benefit of all of the forms of communication we now have, what would you pick? Our route to getting intimacy was the environment. Because if you look at it like an anthropologist, a digital anthropologist, you say, where is the most, or even a non-digital anthropologist, where is the most vulnerable, honest, candid space that people are communicating? One is in the privacy of your own home, which still ethnography can get to if it's very good, but it's very expensive. The second, and I think it's a close second, is in people's private conversations in chat messaging. So everything from WhatsApp to Facebook Messenger to the DMs in Instagram, Snapchat, which when we launched was the biggest place for teenagers to be communicating. And teenagers in Qual are everybody's worst nightmare, because Qual is trying to get to the vulnerable, the emotional, the poetic, and that is not what a teenager is. Our litmus test when we first started was, if we can get through this new model a teenager to truly emote and share honestly and vulnerably and kind of with nuance and reflection, self-reflection, as opposed to grunting of monosyllabic answers, then we've moved this forward, because even ethnography struggled to get that. I still put ethnography as the gold standard even today of like really good qual, but nobody has several months anymore. But if you could get there, then that's a litmus test. And we could, thanks to the way that teens have reinvented their forms of communication inside things, originally things like Snapchat, now TikTok and Instagram. It's their world, their language. So if you get in there and talk to them on their terms, in their language, which by the way isn't just verbal anymore, it's creative, it's, audio and audiovisual and visual and metaphorical, memes. The difficulty of getting a metaphor out of a teen in a Coca-Cola focus group about joy and happiness in the old days, and the ability to get a metaphor about them, it's just night and day. They're already communicating in metaphors, so you're okay to tap into that. And so for me, the big leap forward wasn't scale, it was environment. It was looking at where these intimate conversations are actually happening, finding a way to have a naturalistic conversation that is leveraging AI and chatbot technology in that environment. And so we brought that was our sort of big leap forward for us. And even to this day, most of our competitors, if not nearly all of them, are still trying to talk to people in these big sort of like warehouse environments, which don't feel personal. It don't feel owned by the participant. And up until recently, only one other competitor was even bothering to have conversations in chat messaging. Now zero are. And so it's quite exciting that people still haven't recognized that there's a place to have very authentic, personal, candid conversations. And we're the only ones using it. So I've got thought about a quote that I heard yesterday about AI. And I think is the triggered where I think things are going. It was, we've all heard about AI hallucinating, but if you call an AI out for hallucinating, it will go further than hallucinating and lie and gaslight you to going, no, that's not a hallucination. I think you'll find that you're wrong. And I'm like, this is fascinating. It's like, a couple of years ago, I wrote a book. Wish I'd written it. But I read a book called Everybody Lies, which you might have come across. It was really talking about how we shouldn't be listening to like social listening as a form of data because everybody lies, and that stuck with me to the point where I suddenly realized that was our angle on research and insight and empathy, which is if you're searching for truth, you might get to a truth and then you stop your job and you go home. If you're searching for lies, in the process of getting to truth, you'll get loads of lies. You won't just get the lie that they first said, but the why did you feel you needed to lie in the first place? So you'll get that. What are the limiting beliefs you have? Why have you lied in order to cover up? What are the fears that this lie was covering up? And what are the lies under that? And we've all done therapy now, and psychology has taught us that really we're just a collection of layers of, I call them lies, but they're like aids we've used over the course of our life to cover up a deep set fear. What I love about how we're now looking at our job and repositioning it as lie seeking is that, first of all, it's much more fun. So it's like playing a game of whack-a-mole, and you stop doing it. So you keep searching, and like data collection where you think you've got it. There's hubris in data collection. You're like, I know everything because I've got this huge number, but there's a humility and game-like, a playful kind of like never-endingness to lie hunting. So it's both fun, energetic, animating, and it never ends, which means that you keep asking, well, that's an interesting lie. Let's find the other lies in there. And when I heard yesterday that AI is not only hallucinating, but gaslighting you with lies about that, I was like, hang on a second. This is the first time that a technology has revealed itself as being more like us. So again, I don't believe in the overly anthropomorphizing of AI either, but just for a second, this thought experiment of the reason I think that we've been so wrong about the way we collect data is because we didn't really instinctively think about the lies and that everything we're doing is a lie, because we thought that was insulting of humanity. It's like, no, they're not all terrible lies. A lot of them are subconscious, unknown, and white lies, and they're kind of silly. And it doesn't matter so let's not worry about whether that's a slight of humanity. Just be honest. We're all lying. We're all lying all the time. Be honest about that. And I think in recognizing that AI is lying, and we kind of iconize, we kind of like deify technology. Before we believed that technology needed to be like this and we need to be like that technology. The moment that we actually believe and understand that AI is also lying, maybe we'll finally realize that it's okay to lie, and that we're lying. So I think through the acknowledgement that finally we have a technology that lies, the scales might be removed from our eyes, our collective eyes, and we might realize that we're all lying. Because if a technology can do it, then we can as well.
It's interesting that as a link to like using technology for better self-understanding, right? Because you're basically going, again, lied to cover my back. Yeah, it happens. Sometimes it happens. Like, that doesn't make you a bad person. Now, obviously there's lies and lies, but like, I was watching a film last night called Ford versus Ferrari. It's on Netflix. I really enjoyed it. And one of the things that was interesting is that you had on the one hand, the purest, like straight talking car engineer who basically told the guys at Ford that their cars were a piece of shit. That's why he's building a better one, etc. Like, no filter. And then the corporate guys who were all about saving face. And it was interesting to basically see that they were all interested in trying to win Le Mans, but one of them didn't give a shit about lying while the other one couldn't. Like, they just needed to continue covering their ass, even if it meant misleading people and whatever. But part of me goes, Yeah, that's what happens in a big system. It doesn't make them bad. It just makes them part of a big system that is corporate. Like that's what humanity.
You've taken an example of a lie that I do agree is bad. So
Well,
I think little lies we tell to ourselves about our identity and where we come from and what we believe in, and like,
but my point is, in that situation, and you're stuck in such a complex political machinery, would you have responded any differently if the CEO threatens to fire you if you don't tell the engineers to do as he says? But it's understandable.
as we moved into a more secular age and we got rid of like religious deities to worship, the last 150 years, we've kind of worshipped technological deities. And even though they weren't as smart or beautiful and amazing as humans, we couldn't help worshipping technology. And up until now, so therefore, we've kind of sort of modeled ourselves in their image. Like I'm just watching Chaos, the new Netflix thing about the Greek mythology, and it's about, Zeus losing his marbles or losing his mind in power. So much of it is about worshipping, making the gods happy. I love Greek mythology because it's so in tune with psychology. It really understands, like, gods are a great metaphor for like how we need to make something happy, and otherwise we won't, do well. Guilt and paranoia are all like really good themes there. And I think recently, up until now, we've sort of believed technology's own rhetoric, which is that things can be objective and ordered and right and wrong and black and white and binary. We're just slipping into a new era of, less binary narratives, more nuance. We're still fighting ourselves about whether things should be absolute or not. But we're just about to go into that new era, I think. And when I hear that it's okay for machines to lie, it finally gives us permission to think it's okay, not only okay, but every moment of the day we're lying. And I love that revelation because it suddenly frees us up to be able to ask questions of people in a very different way. Surveys and 20th century research, especially quant, ask people questions in the dumbest computeristic way ever. Stupid question. So people are going to give you stupid answers. So that's why I think data was fundamentally flawed in the 20th century. Even the idea of data is fundamentally flawed. But the moment you say machines can lie and therefore give us permission that we lie and therefore the awareness that we're lying, the way that we ask questions, the way we do research is going to transform radically. And that, for me, is my most interesting quote in the last few.
Love that. It reminds me of something of a slightly different topic, but around interviewing. And I remember reading a book on interviewing. The most interesting bit about it was what they called asking questions that don't have templated answers. And they were talking about it in the context of interviewing because they had things like, what's the weirdest thing I'd find in your browser windows? There is no templated answer for that. Interesting. What you want is to provoke some awkwardness because they start seeing reality coming through. But before that, it's all narrative, right?
Yeah, I agree. Awkwardness, that using the medium of awkwardness, play, silliness, role play, we're doing this with AI prompts. Why the hell aren't we doing that? I think what chat prompt engineering or prompt engineering is going to teach us how to prompt each other. I think that's quite interesting. The irony is that after all these years of like aping the machines, the machine and the way that we train machines is going to finally remind us how to talk to each other. It's quite interesting. It's like, don't do this in the style of an accountant or, or a machine that you actually are. Do it in the style of an artist or an improv comedian. And all of a sudden you release us from, answering in cliches, which is what the majority of humanity is still doing. We talk in cliches.
Yeah, but AI can help us basically go beyond that. Even the hallucination is a way of going, it's not being cliched, it's just being fucking weird. But weirdness is good.
Yeah. I mean, a year ago, I was still saying, we're still the ones that can do the creativity jobs, and the AI is just scouring existing data and doing it quantitatively. So it's just going to give you cliches. Today, I'm actually in a slightly different place on it. I think that because it is going to be a kind of like collaboration between AI and us, and the right users of it never expect it to do the whole job anyway. It's actually going, and the fact that hallucination is now well known it's cool because it keeps us on our toes. So now we're going to be constantly doubting. It's like I've always said this about the difference between a qual and a quant researcher. Walk into the room with this big data set and confidence, and no one ever challenges them because the data says it all. A qual person walks in nervous, ready to defend, and as a result, they've honed their critical thinking powers because always having to find holes in their own work, think 3 steps ahead, look at meaning. What it means is that the quant person's brain is flabby and not very critical, and the qual person's brain is really good at critical thinking. I think in the era of AI where you don't trust it, where it's lying to you and hallucinating, all of us are going to start to have to learn critical thinking and be better at it. Because we've got some huge leaps forward in some ways, but is it? And I like that moment of like, is it tricking you? And if so, what do I have to develop? I have to develop a little bit of healthy cynicism and a sort of game and a sort of ability to play, challenge, and spar with this machine.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to finish on. Where should people go to find out more about you or Sympler?
It's Sympler with a Y, and it's .co.